I kept a folder of bank statements under my mattress for 3 years before I finally understood what those numbers meant. 91 years old, and I still remember the exact moment I realized the company my own grandson swore was changing our family's future did not have a single employee, a single customer, or a single square foot of office space. It never existed. Not on paper, not in a building, not anywhere except in the story he told me every Sunday over coffee. By the time I understood the truth, more than $400,000 of everything I had saved across 7 decades of work was gone, and so, it seemed, was the boy I had raised. I was born in a small farming town where nothing came easy and nothing was wasted. My parents taught me to save every spare coin, and I carried that lesson through a lifetime of factory work, night shifts, and decades of quiet discipline. I never earned a large salary, but I was patient, and patience compounds just as well as interest does. By the time I retired, I had built a modest fortune, enough to live comfortably, help my children through hard times, and leave something meaningful behind for the grandchildren I loved more than anything else in this world. My grandson was the golden child of the family. Bright, charming, always talking about big ideas that made the rest of us feel like we were standing next to greatness. When his parents divorced and money became tight in his household, I stepped in the way any grandparent would, helping with school fees, a used car, small gifts that made his life a little easier. He called me every week just to talk, and those calls became the highlight of my quiet days. I looked forward to his voice the way some people look forward to sunrise. When he turned 26, he came to me with an idea that seemed to glow with promise. He wanted to build a company importing specialty equipment for small businesses, something he said would fill a gap in the market that larger competitors had ignored. He had spreadsheets, projected earnings, supplier contacts, everything laid out with the confidence of someone who had done his homework. I remember thinking how proud his grandfather would have been, watching this boy turn ambition into something real. I told him I believed in him, and I meant every word of it. The first request was modest, $12,000 to secure a supplier contract before a competitor could. I did not hesitate. Family helps family, and I had the means to make his dream a little easier to reach. He thanked me with tears in his eyes, promised to pay me back within the year, and told me this was only the beginning of something wonderful for our whole family. I believed him completely, because why would I not? He was blood, and blood does not lie to blood, or so I had always believed. Over the following 18 months, the requests grew larger and more frequent. A shipment delayed at customs needed emergency funds to release. A key supplier demanded payment up front before honoring a contract. A warehouse lease needed a deposit before the landlord would sign. Each story arrived with specific numbers, specific names, specific urgency, and each time I transferred the money because stopping felt like betraying the one person in my family who still called me every single week just to hear how my day had gone. I told myself this was what love looked like at 90. Looking back, there were moments that should have given me pause. He never once invited me to see the warehouse he described in such vivid detail. He never introduced me to a single supplier, employee, or business partner, despite mentioning dozens of them by name over our phone calls. When I asked to see the company website, he said it was still being redesigned. When I asked about the business registration, he said the paperwork was tied up with a slow government office. Each excuse sounded reasonable on its own, and I was not looking for reasons to distrust the boy I had known since he was small enough to sit on my knee. My daughter, his mother, began asking questions after she noticed how often I mentioned wiring money to help him. She asked to see the paperwork for the business, and when I called my grandson to request copies of the registration documents, his tone changed for the first time in 2 years. He grew defensive, told me I was insulting him by asking for proof, and reminded me how much he had sacrificed trying to build something for our family. I apologized to him that night, ashamed that I had let doubt creep into a relationship built on so much love and history. It was my daughter who finally uncovered the truth, quietly and methodically, the way she has always approached difficult problems. She searched state business registries and found nothing under the company name he had used for 2 years. She searched for the supplier names he mentioned and found no matching businesses anywhere in the country. She searched the warehouse address he had given me once in passing and discovered it was an empty lot behind a shuttered strip mall. There was no business. There had never been a business. There was only a story, told patiently and convincingly, updated whenever a new excuse was needed to ask for more. When she brought me the printed pages showing what she had found, I remember sitting very still for a long time, unable to speak. 91 years of careful saving, of factory shifts and modest living, had been handed over piece by piece to fund nothing at all. Not a failed business, not a risky investment that simply did not work out, but a fabrication built specifically to exploit the trust of a woman who loved her grandson enough to believe every word he said. The betrayal did not arrive as anger at first. It arrived as a strange, hollow silence that settled into my chest and did not leave for days. When I finally confronted him, he did not deny it the way I expected. He simply looked down at his hands and said he never meant for it to go this far, that the first request had been real but small, and that each following request became easier to invent once he saw how quickly I trusted him. He said he always intended to pay it back somehow, though he could never explain how, since the money had gone to rent, personal debts, and a lifestyle that had nothing to do with importing equipment or building anything at all. There was no company to save. There never had been. The hardest part was not the money, though the money mattered more than I ever let myself admit. The hardest part was realizing that every phone call, every Sunday conversation, every moment I treasured as connection with my grandson had likely been calculated, at least in part, to keep the story alive long enough for the next request to feel natural. I began replaying 2 years of memories, wondering which parts had been real affection and which parts had been performance. That kind of doubt changes a person in ways that are difficult to explain to anyone who has not lived through it. My family urged me to involve the police, and after weeks of hesitation, I agreed, though every part of me resisted turning a grandchild into a criminal case. Elder financial exploitation is treated seriously in most jurisdictions, and financial institutions are now required to flag unusual transaction patterns involving older account holders, which is exactly the kind of oversight that eventually helped confirm the scale of what had happened. Investigators traced the transfers, documented the pattern of escalating requests, and confirmed there had been no legitimate business activity behind any of them at any point during those 2 years. I learned during this process that what happened to me is far from rare. Financial exploitation of older adults costs families billions of dollars every year, and the vast majority of cases involve someone the victim already knows and trusts, often a family member rather than a stranger. Researchers who study this pattern describe a common structure, where trust is built slowly, requests start small and reasonable, and each successful transfer makes the next one easier to ask for and harder to refuse. Understanding that pattern did not undo what happened to me, but it helped me see that I had not been foolish. I had simply been targeted by someone who understood exactly how love operates. The legal process that followed was slow and emotionally exhausting. Recovering even a portion of the money proved difficult, since most of it had already been spent rather than saved or invested anywhere traceable. I had to make decisions about whether to pursue restitution through the courts, decisions that meant weighing whatever relationship might remain against the practical need to protect what savings I had left for the years ahead of me. There were nights I questioned whether pursuing this at all was worth the pain it caused the rest of the family, who found themselves forced to choose sides in a conflict none of us had asked for. What helped me most during that period was allowing myself to grieve without shame. I had lost more than money. I had lost a version of my grandson that I now understood may never have fully existed, at least not in the way I believed for so many years. Grief counselors who work with older victims of financial exploitation often describe this as a form of loss similar to bereavement, because the relationship the victim believed they had is, in a real sense, gone, even if the person themselves is still alive and present in the family. Naming that loss honestly was the first step toward healing from it. Slowly, with the support of my daughter and a few close friends, I began rebuilding a sense of stability. I met with a financial advisor who helped me understand what remained and how to protect it going forward, including setting up safeguards that require a second trusted person to approve any transfer above a certain amount. I also began speaking with other families who had experienced something similar, and I found unexpected comfort in realizing how many of us carry this same quiet story, one that rarely gets discussed openly because shame keeps so many people silent about being deceived by someone they raised or loved. If there is one piece of advice I would offer to anyone listening, especially those who are caring for aging parents or grandparents, it is this. Encourage open conversations about money before a crisis forces them. Set up simple safeguards, like requiring a second signature on large transfers or reviewing account activity together on a regular basis, not out of suspicion but out of care. And if you are an older adult being asked for money by someone you love, it is not disrespectful to ask for proof, to request documentation, or to involve a neutral third party before sending funds, no matter how urgent or emotional the request may feel in the moment. Real love does not punish you for asking careful questions. My relationship with my grandson remains unresolved, and I have made peace with the fact that it may stay that way for a long time, perhaps permanently. What I have not lost is my ability to trust the rest of my family, to find joy in ordinary days, and to speak honestly about what happened to me instead of hiding it out of embarrassment. If sharing this story helps even one family recognize the warning signs before the damage becomes irreversible, then something meaningful has come from all of it. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it moved you, please consider subscribing to the channel so more stories like this one can reach the people who need to hear them from Chronicles of Time, and I wish you and your loved ones nothing but honesty, patience, and peace in the years ahead.